Welcome to MELfeed.video. We are commencing a live web stream service via youtube.com from Melbourne, Australia. We currently conduct these streams mainly on Wednesday evenings, with other times to be added as more opportunities arise. Please visit our website at MELfeed.video for further information. This web video project presents old and new community TV programs. Please enjoy your stay with MELfeed.video.
Welcome to NAT Chat. Tonight in our program we have Harry Malos. Harry Malos is a businessman, but as well as a counsellor. And it is a question how a successful businessman ends up being a counsellor, really people's person. Can you, first of all, welcome. And can you just explain to us this phenomenon?
Well, thank you very much, and it's an interesting question that you asked me to reflect on. It's in short, for me, I fell into the adjustment or to the fork in the road that I met. I was in business for a very long time, and I felt a need for me to contribute in a different way, and that need escalated that I needed to have a greater understanding of how our behaviour and how the mind works. And as I saw that need, I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be educated and get a counselling degree, in which I did.
That makes me understand that need that you mentioned, usually it's an event. It's something that happens to our lives, isn't it?
Sure.
And you are a founder of Men's Christian Support Group, and being in that group for over 10 years,
12 years. Yeah.
12 years.
Yes.
12 years. What are the common issues men face in our society today? Challenges, if you like.
Yeah. Look, generally, men have three fears that that affect them the most. The fear of being lonely.
Yes.
The fear of having what they've built crumble. Mm-hmm. And the other, the fear of not being loved. Okay. Usually all those three fears that men face are generally related to marital separation, mm-hmm. and separation from family environment. Mm. Usually when that happens, those three fears are all placed upon them.
Okay, but all right. I think it's going to be easier to make a person talk to you about his loneliness than a man talk about love issues. Is that easy?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think a simple answer to that is yes, the more intimate question of love and related to love isn't as easy to express. But as a counsellor, I think that we get there by trust. When someone trusts you, then they are quite open to discuss even more sensitive issues, such as their personal life and life.
Because I think the average person is not easy to, to my perception, just to open up, especially males.
Yes.
We want to,
yes.
It's not that males do not love, but I believe the average person really hides that part of his life, yes. Even though he acts according to that sometimes. Yes. But
yes.
How do you unpack that one? How do you open that up?
Well, I think you're very right, Paul, by saying that the average male doesn't like talking about the personal and intimate issues because there is a stigma attached that when you do things like that, that you are a weak person.
Yes.
And males do not express their emotions. Yes. Or males don't want to be seen crying. Now, you mentioned the men's group. there's an environment in the men's group that we have which encourages that.
Okay.
It is a safe place, a place where people can show trust and accept trust. And when you set that environment, men, yes, even men, are able to express the most intimate emotions and even allow tears to roll.
Okay. And usually we do another issue that I can see is, for us, we usually learn by mistakes we make.
Right, yes.
But we don't want to make mistakes. And then I'm getting stressed on this one, and I don't want to make mistakes, and then I isolate myself.
Yes, yes.
And how can I get help in that situation in a men's group, for example? I'll just pick an example there.
Okay, well, usually when we make a mistake, we feel that our mistake will be seen as inadequate. We will see ourselves as not being able to provide a particular need as a man. Or another reason is that when we feel like we're inadequate or when we make a mistake, we feel a kind of rejection. And we feel rejection, and that's very strong to a male when they feel rejected. And therefore, we don't like to show other people or tell other people or admit that we make mistakes.
Okay. And now, back to the business situation, we talk about, some feelings, just sporadically, some examples. But I would like to now connect now with those two examples taken into account. Do you find, and that's a question, that your business background, how your business background all of a sudden comes into this? Do you think there's any help from your experience coming now to the counseling? Yes,
because in business, if you do not learn from your mistakes, guess what happens? You end up bankrupt.
That makes sense?
Yeah. So you've got to learn what has been productive in business. You've got to learn what has been costly.
Okay.
And if you cannot concede that, soon your accountant will, or soon you'll be broke.
That means we save, even from psychological perspective, a bit of a cost in life if we don't deal with our own feelings.
Yes, a great collaboration. Yes, we do. If we not admit to how we feel, if we not express how we feel, if we, more importantly, deny how we feel, suppress it is the right word, that feeling will come out in another way. And usually that other way isn't a positive. Usually that other way is blinded. We cannot see it. We become addicts to things.
That is very interesting. Thank you for being with us tonight. Let's have a bit of a break and we'll come back shortly.
Sure.
Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
I've witnessed men of great courage do extraordinary things. Men who've sacrificed their lives to save yours. George Bennett's one of those men. When I broke my leg in 3 places, George picked me up. When I'd given up, George carried me. I wouldn't be here without him.
Here you go, Jack.
George.
Home visits and aged care are just some of the ways the RSL helps our veterans. Buy a badge or donate at anzacappeal.com.au.
This bank is helping to save lives. Every year, 500,000 Victorians have no idea where their next meal is coming from. Food Bank Victoria works with farmers, supermarkets and manufacturers to make sure their surplus stock ends up here, to be distributed to those in need. But all of this is not enough. Right now, this bank needs interest, your interest, to support Victorians in need. If you can help, visit foodbankvictoria.org.au.
Welcome back, and now we continue the interview with Harry Mallos. Harry, you've touched the point before that there is a danger that not facing my own emotions when something happens, that might end up in addiction. Do you think the system today we have in society, we go to a court situation, or do you think the system helps men in particular, talking about this sort of side of society, to face our own issues when we face a separation, for example?
Yep.
And that can cause quite a bit of grief.
Yep.
I can presume that.
Yep.
And can you sort of elaborate as an example a separation? How the society, the court can help or not help for me not to fall into any dangerous situation?
Sure. Well, my feelings are, Paul, that the family court system can never be perfect.
Okay.
Whatever position they stand, it will advantage a certain person and disadvantage the other. What I do believe, however, that can be improved is the support that it gives to both parties in situations where there's family breakdown. I think there's more need in supporting people, more so than actually creating laws to get it right.
Okay, talking about then the support, can you then specify your answer to the example of separation as we talk about that? What sort of stages I will go through, then something main one, I suppose, a main ones. So, and how can I get help or support in a men's group situation?
Sure. Well, one of the first symptoms in separation is anger and frustration. Parties feel that they got the raw end of the deal, that they've been pushed aside, it wasn't their fault. So generally with men, the first symptom is frustration and anger. Now, how support can help this is by validating the person and saying, I hear you're angry, tell me your story. Let him or her express their frustration. That is what support does.
That means at first stage, there is a comfort in my situation of separation to express the way I feel.
Yes.
Or the separation itself, or event, or my feelings, or both.
Hang on. First of all is that you are validated with your feelings.
Okay.
That means I hear you and I recognize that you're feeling this way.
That means I'm not crazy the way I feel. That's a real feeling.
Yes, it's a feeling.
I recognize it.
And that's the first stage.
Okay.
People need to be validated of where they're at.
All right.
And that is the most dangerous, because if they do not get validated, regardless whether they are right or wrong, they need to be validated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then means I've got the reassurance I'm not crazy. The situation is difficult.
Yes.
And then I'm able to sort of to face it.
Yes.
With some sort of logical conclusions.
Yes.
It helps me, isn't it?
Yes, of course it does.
And then the first is the frustration. Then what happens?
Okay. Well, then there's other problems like financial situations, and that's the next stage. Then after financial is the personal loneliness that sets in amongst men. So it goes from frustration and anger to financial issues and confusion, and the final stage is how do I deal now with my life as far as loneliness, and I don't have the social backing as what I had in a family environment.
Okay. Then in that situation, going back to the courts and the system, because for the benefit of our audience and sometimes politicians when they watch, do they help at all in that process, and at what stage they can do that?
Well,
because they come at the end of the court,
yes,
and they need to make a decision at the end of the day for some sort of issues, isn't it?
exactly. So the law is there, and the
Because
family...
we can see a lot of violence, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And is it justifiable, the violence? Is
Yes.
it the system that is wrong?
Yes.
Is it something that we can correct in the system instead of having those bad news all the time?
Well, yes, again, and I don't want to lay a heavy hand on lawyers and so on that are able to stretch people's emotions for their own benefit in order to substantiate their fees.
Okay.
I don't want to go into that subject because
but that is real, though.
It is real, and it does occur.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, the family law system suggests to you, try and work it out. If you can't work it out, we'll make the decision, and normally that decision you might not like. So encourage to work it out. But lawyers get involved, and they give you all these privileges and rights, and then at the end of the day they say that you might not be entitled to them.
That means from the legal perspective you might have some sort of struggles and issues. Now, how does the men group can help supporting me in that situation?
The men's group isn't there to actually correct your wrongs or give you advice to what you do or give you their opinion or tell you who's right and who's wrong. The whole purpose of the men's group is to support men who are in that position.
Okay.
We offer a safe place where we support them.
All right.
We don't ask who's right or wrong. We just say we care about how you feel. We care about your position.
Right.
We care about the fact that you are lonely.
Okay.
We care about that you are frustrated.
On that point exactly, I would like to say that the men's group really, as a support group, looks at me as a wounded person, even though physically I'm not wounded.
Yes, yes.
And somehow walks with me in that period of time.
That's exactly right.
Okay, then in this, because you mentioned anger before, and people talk about anger, especially in divorce situations and separation, as we'll take as an example. Based on your experience, does this help me in my anger?
Does anger help?
No anger. Does the group help me in my anger when I come and be part of it?
Yes. I think it's a good question. And yes, usually when we receive men who have not been with us for the first time, the fact that they're angry and they're allowed to express their anger. Okay. They're allowed to go through the process. Right. Anger is a process. Okay. We cannot deny it. Mm-hmm. We cannot say, don't get angry, because again, it will come back in another way. So we say, okay, we hear you. We hear that you're angry. Tell us how you feel. Tell us exactly what is the anger about. And usually it's anger is not a personality disorder. Usually anger is not really anger. What it is frustration, that they're frustrated.
Thank you for this, Harry. We'll come back in a moment.
There's a difference between forgetting something once and forgetting it many times. There's a difference between forgetfulness and dementia. Talk to someone who understands. Call the National Dementia Helpline on 1800 100 500.
I was in my 40s when I was first diagnosed with bowel cancer. George, my son, was 6 years old at that time. These days, like people of his age, he's very busy, but he still needs to find the time to get to know his bowel cancer risk. Is that right, George?
Yes, Dad. Bowel cancer affects 1 in 12 Australians, young and old, and is our second biggest cancer killer. But if caught early, bowel cancer is treatable and beatable. My dad is living proof of that. So get to know your bowel cancer risk. Talk to your pharmacist or GP about screening. Protect yourself and the ones you love. Go to lovemyfamily.org.au.
If you were living on the streets, wouldn't you want more than just your best friend to keep you safe and warm? Donate to Backpack Bed for Homeless and give warm, waterproof protection and dignity tonight. Call 1300 Oz Help.
Every new lion means 2 more hands. Join us, lions.org.au.
Welcome back with our discussion with Harry Malos. Harry, just to continue on with the anger management, how men are receptive to get help when they are in that situation, when they are angry because things did not go their way for one way or another?
Yeah. Well, yes, they're not as receptive as we would like them to begin with. They fear that they don't need to justify their anger because they fear that it's justified itself.
All right.
They feel that they've been undone by society, by the law, by their spouses, by their family, and therefore they don't need to explain to you why they're angry. They're just angry. So there is a slight difficulty in actually coming in for support. They want to stay there.
Do they feel that they keeping anger, they keep the control of themselves as well?
Yes, very good point. Very good point. That anger helps them to keep control of the situation.
Okay.
That if they lose their
does it really?
Absolutely not. It confuses it even further.
Okay.
Even further, because it doesn't satisfy anything. It doesn't. Anger is good. Anger is good when you are in a safe environment. But when anger is used to hide away other issues, those issues never address. You never address them.
Okay. But talking about those situations, is there any space for men to tolerate more? Do they need to do that? Do they need to forgive more? Can they postpone wrath easily? How do they get into this area of positive reaction instead of being angry?
Okay, usually the steps, unfortunately, are not that good, because usually they need to really fall hard before they say, I've tried everything. I've tried through anger. I've tried through defending myself, and I tried all these other things. But all it seems to happen is negative feelings towards me, and I'm in a deeper hole than what I was before. Usually, and it's unfortunate that I say that is the time when men in general admit, hang on, I've tried this way. I need another approach.
That means the experience in itself, the negative experience is what guides men to look the positive response to anger.
Yeah, a prolonged negative experience.
Okay.
Right. Because
when we say prolonged, in a separation situation, as we picked that example tonight, how long do you think is going to take for an average person to sort of?
That's a very difficult question. It all depends on the individual.
Okay.
Some people react more quicker than others. Others are more difficult to learn.
And is it dependent on their will I suppose as well, isn't it? How much they really want to.
Yeah, I think it depends on the culture as well.
Okay.
You know, a European culture is different to Anglo-Saxon culture, and they've been brought up differently.
Okay.
They've been brought up that men don't make mistakes, and it's okay for men to be continuously angry, because it kind of validates their gender.
And you unpacked for us quite a few things tonight, and we thank you for that. Now I'll touch a different topic here. The group is called Men's Christian Support Group. The word Christian, is it because of the religion? Do you think that is the?
Well, I wouldn't like to call it religion, because religion, you automatically think that there's a set of rules that we need to abide by.
Okay.
And the men's group isn't about that. It's more about values.
All right.
We have Christian values, and we don't hide the fact, but we don't have rules. We don't say that unless you reach a certain stage, you can't come into the men's group. That's where religion is different to coming into a group that has values.
Okay, don't you think though, I'll touch religion topic now, don't you think Christ said that God doesn't like divorce?
Yes.
But you need to deal with somebody who's divorced now, going through divorce.
Yes.
How do you comfort that person when you call yourself Christian and all of a sudden Christ doesn't like divorce, God doesn't like it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, generally God doesn't like sin, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't want you to help the person who's in sin.
That means in this case, God forgives me on that.
Absolutely, God forgives continuously. And if we understand that theory, the better life will be, because we don't have to go by certain rules that you called religion before. Our men's group is not based on religion.
Okay, because even myself, I'm inclined to support the Christian view of this, and especially when Christ found that incredible power to forgive his enemies.
That's right.
And that is an ultimate sort of situation. Yeah. Do you think it's possible for us as men to reach that point, to say, I forgive my enemies?
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question again, Paul, that you raise. It all comes down to self-awareness.
Okay.
When you are aware that you have made mistakes as well, when you are aware that you would like to be forgiven for the mistakes you've made, perhaps you're in a better position to forgive others as well.
All right.
These are some of the values that Christian faith bring, as opposed to what religion brings.
All right. Okay, because religion is really a bunch of rules together. That's the perception we get.
Exactly.
Harry, thank you for being with us in this subject, which is not easy. And we, I think, found out more things, and we have packed more things. And you've been practical in our discussion tonight. We appreciate, and I hope we're going to see you again. To our viewers, thank you for being with us. And hopefully we're going to see you soon again next week.
So, you think you're ready for this?
To take on the world? Why not?
MELfeed.video.
Welcome to the CEC Report for the 21st of August 2015. I'm Elisa Barwick, and joining me today is Robert Barwick. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks, Elisa.
And in today's CEC report, brace yourself for GFC Mark II and world needs people's quantitative easing. So firstly, brace yourself for GFC Mark II. And just before we go into this, people might have heard the news that just broke this morning that the Prime Minister of Greece, Alexis Tsipras, has resigned to throw open the whole question of the new bailout, which has just been approved by the German Parliament as well as by the other authorities, to the population, to the people.
To a snap election. And this itself is a symptom of what we're going to talk about, Elisa. I mean, these are the hot spots in the global financial system at the moment. Greece is definitely one of them because it's a fuse for the whole European system. The former Finance Minister of Greece, Varoufakis, just a day or two ago made the point that the bailout as it's being passed is just consolidating the power of the oligarchy in Greece, the Greek oligarchs, right? And you know, this has made Syriza wasn't elected for this purpose, right? So anyway, Tsipras is not by any means the worst guy in the world. We don't know the full picture yet. It's just breaking news, but it'll definitely become a real focus for the world in the coming little period while this election's held.
But it's a feature, a sub-feature of the GFC Mark II, and what we've really seen, even in the major press outlets in the recent week or two, are that all the indicators that we're seeing, various indicators, are in complete parallel to the indicators and the various patterns that were occurring in the lead-up of the 2007-2008 breakout of the global financial crisis. And this is not being stated just by us alone, as I mentioned. And one article which is indicative of it was the Telegraph, the London Telegraph of the 16th of August, which had the headline, "The doomsday clock for a global crash strikes 1 minute to midnight as central banks lose control." And they also referred to it as an end game. Now, they went through a series of various things using some very useful graphs. Firstly, they went through the collapsing commodities market, which is in parallel to the pre-2007-08 period. They'd been booming prior to that. Stock markets being at record highs. The stock market in the US has only risen for longer pre-1929 and pre the 2000 blow up of the dot-com bubble.
So when you see that, you've already got a contradiction between the commodities markets and the stock market, right? And what you're seeing in some of these commodities markets and other physical economic indicators, they're not just falling. There's there's record falls, and the similar thing was happening before 2000. I think especially August or September 2008, you had this shipping index, the Baltic Dry Index, that's run out of London, had a 90% collapse. And it was a real indicator, but the stock markets were at these record levels, right? So people unfortunately get told by the media to focus on the stock market, and the more it goes up, the more they're told, oh, this is great, whereas the stock market is always the last thing to know what's going on.
And then you've got the housing bubble is the other major thing, which we'll talk about a bit in regard to Australia, and we have been talking about on the program. The LIBOR, this is interesting because the LIBOR rate has been rising over the last 12 months to dramatic highs, which shows an increase of the risk of how the banks perceive the risk of interbank lending. So they would know that.
The way the financial system's set up is banks every day, every hour are lending to each other behind the scenes to consolidate their books overnight, etc. And when the interest rate starts going up like this, it means banks aren't willing to make those loans to other banks because they stop trusting them. And of course it was the LIBOR hike in 2008 and then a total freeze in interbank lending on the back of that, which was the global financial crisis back then.
Yeah, because that's the point at which things break down if the banks can't even lend to each other and you can't have settlements and so forth on a hour-by-hour basis. Interest rates are, of course, still at emergency lows and even into negative interest rates from central banks across Europe. And, of course, there's no capacity, therefore, if there's another GFC to reduce interest rates and pump out the money. The US has announced the end of their quantitative easing program, and as the Telegraph article referenced, most parts of the world are expected to announce increasing interest rates relatively soon, which will have a further impact on everything. And the other thing that they referenced in the Telegraph were price-earnings ratio, which in the US have only been higher in 1929, 2000 and 2007.
And that just refers to when you pay for a share on the stock market, the dividend you get off that share compared to the price of the share, right? There's this enormous multiple when it should be, maybe 10 times or something, but you're getting into 18, 20 and even more times than that. And it shows you, it's just proof that the share market, the stock market is completely overvalued, right? But those dates are key because, 1929, 2000, 2007, and what happened next. Each time, big crashes.
And of course, the other thing that is being continually raised, at least in our Australian media, is the so-called downturn in China. And for the person on the street, particularly people that work in mining and so forth, and we've seen the collapse of the mining boom here, they're extremely worried. They don't have a more sophisticated sense of what's actually going on in China as we've presented continually on this show. So they really fear that, okay, well, China's going to collapse and that's going to leave our economy completely in the lurch.
Well, here's the thing. China won't collapse per se because China won't allow itself to collapse because the Chinese government have a commitment to using credit to make sure they build the infrastructure and keep people in jobs that they need to. But what can happen is when there's shifts in emphasis in China, for a country like Australia that's been like one of those suckerfish on the back of a whale in regard to China. I mean, that's fine as far as it's gone, but that's a great thing to aspire to as a national economy. That's what Paul Keating set us up for.
Yeah.
So when China doesn't import as much iron ore or doesn't import as much coal, of course it has a huge effect here when it should never have had that kind of effect. And if we don't want to have an implosion, we should just do what China does, put our own credit into developing our own economy more. But on the back of what has happened, Elisa, we had a discussion in our office here the other day that when I took note, we hadn't had a discussion like that since 2007. And what we were discussing was the anecdotes that we get as a political organisation, because we're talking to people around the country every day, hundreds and hundreds of them. And you get this anecdotal evidence coming that doesn't get reported in the media that shows you how bad it is out there in places like Perth, in places like Adelaide. Frankly, central Queensland with the coal mining areas, etc., in terms of things like the housing market. And what we've got left is 2 islands of the bubble, Melbourne and Sydney. That's all that's left, right? And we talked about this a little bit last week. But some of the anecdotes, I'll name one. One individual in Brisbane reported a certain bank, one officer of one bank foreclosing on 80 houses a week. Right, these are the kind of anecdotes that we were starting to pick up in 2007, which was the beginning of the snowballing that led to the 2008 global financial crisis, right? And you're getting more of that. But the reason we're discussing it is by contrast, the banks are announcing these enormous profits, off-the-chart profits, right? Commonwealth Bank, $9 billion. And what's the state of the economy that they're taking those profits from, right? So, like I said, there's a solution to this, which is we should do what China's doing, or put another way, which we'll talk about after the break, what the Labor Party frontrunner Jeremy Corbyn has proposed in the UK called People's Quantitative Easing. You don't have to rely on export income to have money for your economy. The government can take charge of a direction of development and investment and produce the money itself.
Absolutely, because after the GFC 2007-08, it was basically the growth in China's economy that they decided to invest that kind of credit in their own economy, but also embarking on building major projects overseas. That actually was the only thing that kept the global economy going.
And now they're inviting the rest of the world to do it through the AIIB.
And that's crucial because it wasn't completely successful, and it is falling away now because of the collapsing countries like Europe and the United States. So those countries need to join in, every country needs to join in order for it to be successful. So after the break, we're going to take a look in a feature section of this report at what is this people's quantitative easing.
Do you currently have a community service announcement on free-to-air television? If you do, you can now submit it to us as well via our website at MELfeed.video. We have lots of time to fill on these broadcasts, and we are sure to give your announcement a great run on MELfeed.video.
Are you playing renovation roulette? I'm John Jarrett. Now I know that deadly asbestos lies hidden in 1/3 of Aussie homes. It can be found in any home built or renovated before 1987. Lurking in walls, under floor covering, behind tiles, in roofing. Asbestos, it was used everywhere. So if you're a renovator or a tradie, you could be risking your life and the lives of others. Remember, go slow. Asbestos, it's a no-go. Visit asbestosawareness.com.au to learn what you need to know.
I've witnessed men of great courage do extraordinary things. Men who've sacrificed their lives to save yours. George Bennett's one of those men. When I broke my leg in 3 places, George picked me up. When I'd given up, George carried me. I wouldn't be here without him.
Here you go, Jack.
George.
Home visits and aged care are just some of the ways the RSL helps our veterans. Buy a badge or donate at anzacappeal.com.au.
Welcome back to the CEC Report. World needs people's quantitative easing. How can we address the conditions that are driving the world into the next financial crisis? The solution is currently the subject of fierce debate in the United Kingdom. Labor Party leadership frontrunner Jeremy Corbyn has given the bankers in the City of London and their political lackeys in the Tory party and the Blair faction of his own Labor Party a heart attack by proposing a national investment bank that will fund real growth in the British economy using what he calls people's quantitative easing. This week, the CEC produced this explanation of people's quantitative easing.
People's quantitative easing, the principles behind it. The reality that sovereign national governments can create public credit and expend it for the common good has now erupted as the central issue of MP Jeremy Corbyn's bid to become the next leader of the Labor Party in the United Kingdom. Corbyn's policy for the government creation of such credit, dubbed by some a people's quantitative easing, has terrified and enraged the City of London bankers, whose crimes will be stopped under Corbynomics. This, indeed, is the rub. Will the City of London and Wall Street mafia continue to create credit for their own private, usurious and speculative ends, for which the public ultimately pays through bloody austerity, or will national governments seize that power back from them? That sovereign power of credit has actually been wielded from time to time by sovereign governments, precisely as Corbyn proposes, if all too rarely. Under its first Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, it was the bedrock upon which the bankrupt new nation of the United States was consolidated after the Revolutionary War of 1776 to 1783. It was reasserted through President Abraham Lincoln's greenback policy, which enabled the United States to survive the insurgency by Southern slave owners and their Wall Street backers, and, even as the Civil War raged, to build the Great Transcontinental Railroad, which finally unified the nation. And it was instituted once again by President Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s and 1940s to pull the United States out of the Great Depression and create the arsenal of democracy to help win World War II. Public credit for the common good was also the rock upon which Australia's own national bank, the Commonwealth Bank, was established in 1912 by Australian Labor Party MP King O'Malley, who proclaimed on 30th of September 1909 in Parliament I am the Hamilton of Australia. Prime Minister John Curtin and Treasurer Ben Chifley reasserted it to finance the Allied victory in the Pacific during World War II, including building a world-class machine tool industry from scratch, and it was to be the pivot upon which they intended a great post-war industrial and agricultural expansion of Australia before the British-directed local financial oligarchy and the Privy Council in London overthrew those plans. Both the Hamilton and O'Malley-Curtin-Chifley policies were presented in depth at the CEC's March 2015 International Conference, The World Land Bridge, Peace on Earth, Goodwill Towards All Men. Such public credit for the common good has even taken place in the United Kingdom itself, as under the 1945 to 1951 Labor government of Prime Minister Clement Attlee. Attlee nationalised the Bank of England for that purpose, and in the second reading of the Bank of England Bill on 29th of October 1945, which accomplished that, his Chancellor of the Exchequer, Hugh Dalton, cited Australia's successful government-owned Commonwealth Bank as a key precedent. With the assistance of a nationalised central bank, Attlee's government achieved near full employment, a 20% increase in farm output between 1947 and 1952, nationalisation of 20% of the economy, including, in addition to the Bank of England, civil aviation, coal mining, the railways, canals, communications, electricity and gas utilities, and the steel industry. The construction of 1 million new homes between 1945 and 1951, a comprehensive welfare system which alleviated the conditions of abject poverty suffered in the 1930s and drove significant improvements in public health, infant mortality and life expectancy, and the National Health Service, a publicly funded healthcare system which offered treatment free of charge for all and treated 8.5 million people in 1948, its first year of operation. Between 1948 and 1951, the government's spending on health almost doubled from £6 billion to £11 billion. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has put the issue of the deployment of public credit for the common good once again squarely on the agenda, and the bankers and their whores in the mass media and political parties are screaming bloody murder. The Blairites in the Labor Party as shrilly as the most rabid Tories. Why? Because it won't work? No, precisely because it has worked in the past and will work again. But it will mean a tectonic shift in power away from the City of London, whose financial oligarchy managed the British Empire in its 19th century heyday. Now assisted by its junior partner Wall Street and the IMF and World Bank, that British informal financial empire, in the words of its own apologists, still rules much of the world today. From his own experience as Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer beginning in 1852, William Gladstone explained the ruling principle. The hinge of the whole situation was this: the government itself was not to be a substantive power in matters of finance, but was to leave the money power supreme and unquestioned. Now, however, with the aid of the Corbyn campaign, as ordinary people are beginning to question the money power and how credit creation actually works, or should work, the private bankers are suffering their worst nightmare.
After the break, we'll watch People's Quantitative Easing, the Principles Behind It, Part 2.
Joy, well-being, community, inclusion.
Special Olympics is a global movement for people with an intellectual disability, creating a world of inclusion and community through sport, where every person is accepted and welcomed, regardless of ability. One athlete, one volunteer, one family member at a time, helping to make the world a better place. Join the inclusion revolution by supporting Special Olympics.
And choose to include.
I want to get the word out to blokes about a little gland called the prostate. It's only the size of a walnut, but it can cause a whole lot of grief. Prostate cancer deaths pretty much equal breast cancer deaths. The problem is, if you wait too long, it may be too late. It took one of my mates. Don't make me angry. Talk to your doctor about your prostate, and if necessary, get it checked. You'd be nuts to leave it to chance.
Every new line means two more hands. Join us, lions.org.au.
Welcome back to the CEC Report. Now for part 2 of people's quantitative easing, the principles behind it.
The simple facts of the matter. Private banks create money in their normal course of business because they are allowed to lend out some multiple of their deposits. Central banks, on the other hand, create money out of thin air. But whether privately or publicly created, everything hangs upon what the newly created credit is used for investment into the real physical economy or for speculation. In the 1920s in the United States, for instance, the big Wall Street banks lent the funds of their depositors largely into speculation. That inevitably led to a financial bubble and then the crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. In order to put the economy back on a solid footing, President Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 enacted the famous Glass-Steagall Bill, which mandated a strict separation of normal commercial banking, i.e. that related to the real economy, from the sort of speculative activities typical of such private banking empires as Brown Brothers Harriman, the world's largest in the 1930s, and which, not surprisingly, financed the rise of Hitler. Glass-Steagall was repealed under President Bill Clinton in 1999. Coming on top of a similar sweeping deregulation of finance in the City of London in 1986, the Big Bang, this unleashed the global bubble economy of today, where speculative instruments of all sorts now total over $2 quadrillion against a world gross domestic product of only $77 trillion. Inevitably, this channeling of credit away from the real economy into a speculative bubble led to the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. Now, the same too big to fail banks in London and Wall Street which caused the global financial crisis are 40% larger than then, mainly because the central banks of the United States, Europe and Japan have since created $8 trillion of additional money through quantitative easing and pumped it almost solely into those banks to save them at all cost. So where did they get all that money from? The Bank of England itself gives the lie to the hysterical anti-Corbyn proclamations in the United Kingdom, as in Australia, that you just can't go and create money. As the bank itself explains in their Quantitative Easing Explained leaflet, the bank creates money and uses it to buy assets such as government bonds and high-quality debt from private companies. In a related video, the bank adds that quantitative easing is new money that the bank creates electronically. But both in the United Kingdom as well as the United States or the EU, this quantitative easing has been nothing but a bailout for the too big to fail banks. The new $8 trillion has gone almost entirely into purely financial assets, and it has been rigorously proven that the banks have lent almost none of that money into the real physical economy. Now, just as before the global financial crisis, the too big to fail banks have used much of the quantitative easing to buy up mortgage-backed securities. This has once again created a gigantic global real estate bubble, led by the soaring home prices in Sydney, Melbourne and London, among other of the world's major cities. By contrast, the people's quantitative easing, which Corbyn proposes, is simply the national banking policies of the US, Australian and even British governments in their better days, when national banks would create money to invest in new physical assets. In particular, infrastructure as the driver for economic growth, as the Chinese have amply demonstrated of late, as documented in a presentation at the CEC's March conference. China, great infrastructure projects at home and abroad. Just as the Chinese have done, and the BRICS nations as a whole plan to do with their new development bank, the Asian Infrastructure Bank and other new credit facilities, sovereign governments can create credit and direct it into building bridges, railways, roads, dams, power stations and buildings for hospitals and schools, as well as capital spending for new plant and equipment. Any new infrastructure or plant and equipment, in particular machine tools which embody new technology, will lower the physical cost of production while increasing economic output and thus produce a net physical profit. All newly created credit will therefore be backed up by actual physical production, not by hot air as at present. In reality, money is not the issue at all. For instance, on the 20th of January 1913, when the Commonwealth Bank first opened for business, the bank's first governor, Denison Miller, proclaimed, "This bank is being started without capital, as none is required at the present time, but it is backed by the entire wealth and credit of the whole of the Commonwealth of Australia." The extraordinary resources and productive power of the entire Australian continent had not hitherto been released because the private bankers had kept a chokehold on the creation and deployment of credit. In the event, a modest transfer of funds from the State Savings Bank of Tasmania, organised by long-time Tasmanian MP King O'Malley, and savings of the public deposited in the bank at its post office branches, was sufficient to launch the bank onto its extraordinary course of financing World War I and building Australia's young economy. Nor is there any danger of inflation, as the City of London-owned Blairites squeal, as long as such new credit is directed into a constantly expanding physical economy. Again, the whole issue is, what is the credit extended for? If for an expanding physical economy, there are virtually no limits to the process. If for speculation, any such credit is too much. Given that the City of London dominates global finance, Corbyn's campaign threatens its grip over the entire world, not just the United Kingdom. That's what the ruckus is all about. In addition to national banking, the United Kingdom and the rest of the transatlantic sector and Australia urgently need Glass-Steagall modelled legislation to rein in London and Wall Street, because the world is otherwise headed for a worse crash than even the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. As Corbyn's close associate, longtime Labor MP John McDonnell, emphasised in a 12th of August article in The Guardian, all the factors that caused the 2007-08 crisis are reappearing on the scene, and Corbyn therefore intends to enact a full-blown Glass-Steagall system to separate day-to-day and investment banking. In fact, legislation to enact Glass-Steagall style banking separation failed by only a 225 to 274 vote in the House of Commons and lost by a mere 9 votes in the House of Lords during the 2013 debate on the Financial Services Banking Reform Bill 2013. So the next time some idiot of a politician whines in a nasal voice with barely controlled hysteria, "Where will the money come from to pay for this?" just inform the ignoramus, the same place as it always has, from a government-run national bank committed to expanding the real economy. Or, as it is sometimes called in the post-global financial crisis, less scientific lingo of today, from people's quantitative easing.
That's it for this week. For more information, go to our website. Thanks for tuning into the CEC Report, and tune in next week for more.
MELfeed.video.
Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Hello and welcome to this week's Harmony in Diversity, a program that endeavours to encourage harmony and diversity across the wide range of faiths and beliefs here in Victoria by showcasing individuals and groups involved in interfaith and multi-faith activities. This week we continue our look at the people involved with the Centre of Melbourne Multi-Faith and Others Network by interviewing a third member of the Singh family, Jessie and Dia's daughter, Jamel. Again, Norm Curry has been talking to Jamel.
Jamel, you describe yourself as a freelance interfaith and cultural education project manager. Cultural education is an interesting concept. How does that relate into multi-faith? How do those things two work together?
Well, a bit of background first. Mum and Dad started the Multi-Faith Association in South Australia when I was about 11 years old. And to stop my sisters and I from playing cards under the tables at the various places of worship, Mum used to make me take the minutes. And at the time it was a big responsibility, 11-year-old taking minutes. What I didn't understand at the time, that the education that gave me about the various faiths, the different places of worship that we visited, because each month they would have it at a different place of worship and talk about various issues. This gave me a very broad understanding of interfaith at a young age. Yes. Now, what that meant for me is that it made me a better global citizen. Mm-hmm. It gave me the street wisdom that I needed to be a better person. That's helped me in every aspect of work that I've done my entire life. Mm-hmm. Whether it was hospitality, whether it was real estate, whether it was teaching at universities. Mm-hmm. You say real estate, how did having a multi-faith understanding help in real estate? Mm. How it helped is that when I walked into a Jewish person's home and they had the symbol, the Jewish symbol outside the door, I knew it was a Jewish home. I'd walk in and I said, Shalom. Mm. If it was an Asian household, I took off my shoes. Mm-hmm. When it was a Polish household, I took a bottle of vodka with me. Mm. But obviously you wouldn't give a wine to a vendor if they were a Muslim family. Mm-hmm. And it was about cultural understanding. Yes. And that cultural education made me the best at whatever it is that I was doing. Yes. I'm not going to be able to replicate in a classroom what I learnt. Mm-hmm. But if there can be a glimpse of that, yes, given to students in schools today, we'll have a lot more understanding and accepting, not tolerating, accepting society. Yes. And that's where cultural education comes into it.
Many of the children that you'd be moving amongst from an education point of view would be either migrants themselves or children of migrants. How does the communication across culture with those children go?
I find it rather easy. teacher students that are going through studies right now, unless they pick up CALD, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, as a separate subject within their degree, are not learning how to deal with CALD students when they come into the classroom.
Right.
And that is becoming an increasing problem, because there isn't a school in Victoria that you walk into that doesn't have some element of multiculturalism within it.
Right.
And dealing with those different cultures is going to define how the student understands. For example, I was doing some school education in Townsville with Uncle Jean Blow, and he was telling me how when he was younger, he was struggling with maths, with fractions. And he went home and Grandma, I just can't get these fractions. I don't understand what the teacher's on about. And the grandmother happened to be cutting a watermelon at the time. And so she said, okay, I'll explain it. And she cut the watermelon into half. And she said, so there's 2 halves here, so it's 1/2. This is 1/2, this is 1/2. But together there's 2 of them, so that's 1/2. Then she cut it into quarters, and they explained it, and then into eighths. Now every time Uncle Jean thinks about fractions now, he thinks about watermelons, but he gets it.
Yes.
And I think a big point in schooling today is that teachers need to understand that different cultures have a history of genes which learn differently.
Yes.
Not
yes.
all kids are going to learn something the same way.
No.
And by having that cultural understanding is going to help a teacher make a better student.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what's lacking in our school system right now.
Okay, that's the cultural side of it. From the faith point of view, you've got all these different faiths sitting there. How's that managed? How well is that managed, or is it possible to manage that?
It is possible. I know ACARA, the Australian Curriculum Authority, is looking at currently reviewing with people like myself and all the heads of various religious organisations and education how we can introduce religious education within a school system. At the moment, it's basically Christianity taught as RE.
Yes.
Otherwise, unless you're going to a Jewish school or a Muslim school, then you get religious understanding and education in those various other discipline areas.
Yes.
A lot of the private schools are now looking at a more rounded approach towards religious education, but in the public school system at the moment, it's still not at that level because it's not within the national curriculum. For a teacher, it can become hard. If the teacher themselves don't understand why a child is wearing a hijab or a turban,
yes.
It's great. We've cut out nuts out of the schoolyard because there's so many people that are allergic to it.
Yes.
But do we go to the point where we cut out ham out of a school area because there's Muslim kids in there and it's against their religion to eat pork?
Yes.
Do we then cut out meat or beef if it's because there's Hindu kids in the class as well?
Yes.
At what level does it become?
Exactly. Yep.
At what level does it become right or wrong and respectful? But as long as they understand that this child wears a hijab, they are Muslim, and they don't eat pork,
yes.
then their friends can at least understand that and not shove the ham down their throat or something,
yes,
you know.
right.
No
Yes.
point sharing a ham sandwich with a Muslim friend. And it's the same with households, you know. We have people coming here all the time from all walks of life and, you know, they walk in with a bottle of wine and mum gets offended by that. But at the same time, she understands that that's their culture.
Yes, exactly.
But if everybody had a bit of understanding on these issues, then it would make life a lot easier, especially in the schoolyard. It will also then break down racially motivated violence within the schoolyard, which is having huge effects, not just within a school, but within the community at large. There's a school that I was working with last year, and they called me in and said, Jamil, we're having racially motivated violence and there's a lot more tension happening, and it was in a secondary school.
Yes.
Amazing as far as cultural hot school. It was so diverse. It was ridiculous how diverse this school was. I think they have about 250 different countries represented within the school. It's a big school.
Yes.
But after spending 3 days in the school with the kids and with what was going on, I worked it out that it was 2 different fractions of Islamic students that were fighting with each other.
Right.
And the cause was girls. The Afghan boys were going out with the Somalian girls.
Yes.
But the Somalian boys weren't allowed to go out with the Afghan girls.
Yes.
Because of cultural differences.
Yes.
Right? But what we did then is we then went to the imams, the priests of the different mosques, and said, this is what's going on. And we then created entertainment and events around, for example, around Ramadan and stuff like that, where we brought these 2 different Islamic communities together to celebrate together their various events and create an understanding level and a respect level within those different fractions. Yes, different cultures, but the same religious base. And that understanding level, if that was at a wider range, would help with racially motivated violence, especially within the schoolyards and then the community at large.
Here are the current weather readings for Melbourne, Geelong and Shepparton on the MELfeed.video weather wall. It also includes tomorrow's forecast and expected minimum temperatures in these areas overnight. This is the MELfeed.video weather wall. We are currently looking for a sponsor. If you're interested, please email Michael at MELfeed.video for more details.
Australian women need to kiss more. Watch out for persistent and unusual symptoms as they could be a sign of ovarian cancer. Know the important signs and symptoms. Kiss. Look out for symptoms like abdominal or back pain, difficulty eating or feeling full quickly, or persistent bloating, or a change in toilet habits. If you're experiencing persistent and unusual symptoms for more than 14 days, see a GP. Make sure you kiss regularly.
I've witnessed men of great courage do extraordinary things. Men who've sacrificed their lives to save yours. George Bennett's one of those men. When I broke my leg in 3 places, George picked me up. When I'd given up, George carried me. I wouldn't be here without him.
Here you go, Jack.
George.
Home visits and aged care are just some of the ways the RSL helps our veterans. Buy a badge or donate at anzacappeal.com.au.
You recently organised a thing called Walking Humbly, which brought faiths together. Can you describe a bit of the originality and the process of Walking Humbly?
For sure. It's interesting because Green Faith Australia approached me at the start of 2009 and said, we've been given funding, it's a pre-Parliament of World Religions event, and we want to organise to have delegates go around Victoria to visit various communities. And they then commissioned me to be the project manager for that event. My first degree was in Aboriginal Administration Management, so I have a very close affiliation with the Aboriginal community. When I was in the Army Reserves, a couple of months after joining up, I got asked to accompany a team of doctors, because I was a medic, to Cooper Pedy. And they were doing cataract operations on the Indigenous elders in those areas. And I quickly realised that it wasn't because I had the best rifle shot or because I aced my exams or whatever the case was. I now realise that it was because of the colour of my skin. The Aboriginal community didn't see me as a threat of any sort. No, I'm not Aboriginal, but At the same time, I'm not a white fella either.
No.
And I think if we're realistic about the fact that there is a lot of fear and anguish and pain and a lot of healing that needs to take place with the Aboriginal community, it will make life a lot easier. It's not common practice to say white fella or black fella. I can get away with it. I've got the right colour skin to be able to. But for a white person to be saying black fella or whatever the case is, it doesn't sound right or feel right, or it's not socially acceptable.
That's right.
And if we got over those sorts of apprehensions, that would make society heal and move forwards in a loving manner a lot more simply. Coming back to walking humbly, a big part of what I wanted to do was, because there was a lot of international delegates that were going to be on this trip, is introduce them to Aboriginal culture, Aboriginal spirituality, because that's what's uniquely Australian.
Yes.
And part of the trip, we ended up with about 88, I think, delegates on the trip. And we went from Melbourne, we started off at the Blackburn Gurdwara, they gave us breakfast there. And then we went to Warrawa College.
Yes.
And we, one of the ladies in particular that were on the trip, one of the participants, was actually a teacher at Warrawa College 30 years ago. I think it was about 30 years ago, and she had photos and things like that. And the teacher that was with us, the Aboriginal teacher that was at Warrawa introducing us, found his photo when he was a little boy with his older sisters within those photos that she'd brought along. The amount of healing that in itself had. He saw that this teacher had so much respect and love for the community that she worked with. And she saw one of her students who had become this amazing man. It was a really good process. We also then visited the nearby graveyards, which Uncle Reg Blow then took us on a little journey and did a talk with us there. The teacher at Warrawa College did a smoking ceremony as we all came in and came through the smoke. From Warrawa, we then went to Kinglake, and we saw firsthand the devastation. You know, people sleeping in tents on their blocks of land with their house in rubble right next to it and stuff, and caravans on housing blocks with all the rubble of the house there and stuff like that. The last day was about being with the Indigenous community in Barmah Forest.
Right.
Now, the idea was not to go see at how they do what they do. It was more about creating a platform of understanding, acceptance, and also a lot of healing. The main healing that took place while we were there was between the Echuca nuns and the Indigenous communities, the Yorta Yorta Nations Aboriginal community that are up there. It was interesting because obviously the sisters from Echuca were young kids when Auntie Denise and Auntie Walder and all the aunties that were there were young kids as well. And all of these Aboriginal elders now were all brought up on Cummeragunja, on the reserve. And the fact that we got into this questioning about, they were telling us about how they had these code words when the police were coming into Cummeragunja. One of the elders would yell out this word, and the kids used to swim across the Murray to the other side or submerge themselves in the water to wait for the police to go across to the other side and wait there until they were called back. Because when the police came, a lot of the time one of the kids would be taken away. And Auntie Denise was telling us the story, and I turned around to one of the sisters who was basically in tears while she was telling us. And I said to her, "Aunt, where were you when this was all going on?" And she said to me, "Jamil, I was a young girl when this was going on, and we had the priest come to us with this young Aboriginal kid and say to us that this child has been abused or neglected, and we used to look at the priest as this hero because he's saving this child. We didn't know this was going on. It was not like there was any internet or TV telling us what was actually going on. And what that did was Auntie Denise and the other aunts and stuff that were there were hearing their responses to this, and all of a sudden realised that they're not to blame. And since then, the Echuca nuns and Kamarganja, they've been doing a fair bit of work together. And on the 28th of March and 29th of March, we're actually going back to Kamarganja, and we're going to be helping them clean up their cemetery where there's some amazing elders that have been buried. For example, William Cooper and Auntie Margaret Tucker and the Atkinsons, and the Echuca nuns are going to be coming along, and Women's Interfaith Network and Green Faith hopefully will be coming along, and Common as well. And the idea would be that there's a renewed sense of hope and healing that has taken place from that 2009 initial journey there. And that ongoing relationship, it's not just about going into a place and then saying your bit, doing your bit, and then that's the end of it. It's about that ongoing reconciliation and healing that can then move us forward towards making a better society.
Every time you shop, the choices you make affect our community. It is important to select Australian products made by Aussie-owned companies. Our food security means quality and peace of mind. Your purchasing power keeps your dollars multiplying in our economy, keeping jobs, profits and decisions being made right here, which is better for your children.
So the next time you buy, look for the AusBuy logo. It makes all the difference.
We've all seen this one time or another. We may even have done it ourselves. But inhaling balloon gas is very dangerous and can be fatal. The helium in balloon gas acts as an asphyxiant, and when you inhale, it displaces the oxygen in your lungs. Balloon gas is safe in balloons and when you release it in a well-ventilated area and in a safe manner. So the next time you see some sucker about to inhale balloon gas, or you think it's going to be a laugh, stop and be gas-wise.
Hi, I'm Lane Beachley. Australians have recycled enough printer cartridges to cover Bondi Beach 12 times. That's kept 11,000 tonnes of valuable resources out of landfill. Drop your used original cartridges into the special boxes at participating retail outlets, and they'll be turned into new products from pens to road surfaces. Help us keep up the good work. Find out more at cartridges.planetark.org.
Alleluia,
Was there any sign that that healing spread across into recognition of the status of Aboriginal spirituality?
Oh, I think especially because of Common, Centre of Melbourne Multi-Faith and Others Network, Mum and Uncle Reg Blow and yourself and Uncle Biao and stuff and Uncle Anand have really pushed that into the mainstream, in that Aboriginal spirituality is a faith of its own. It is a culture of its own. It can't be grouped in with another. It's not Christianity. It's not any other religion. It is its own religion, so to speak. Their culture, their faith is the land, is creation, is the dream time. And that is definitely being recognised. And because of that push by Common towards that Aboriginal spirituality, it's also then put help towards the world Indigenous communities coming up and stating their own faith, their own culture to be recognised on its own. It's not an other, it's its own recognised, established culture, religion.
That's right.
And now that Uncle Reg Blow's the president of Common, and is the first Indigenous person, or first Aboriginal here in Australia to be the head of an interfaith organisation, a multi-faith organisation, that in itself is a big step in the right direction.
You've sort of half answered, but anticipated my question is to interpret your dream. How do you think multi-faith Australia would look, or should look, if you had your way? What would it be like?
It's not about blurring the fences between religions. It's not about making all people one and the same. But it's about lowering the fences enough so you can talk to your neighbour and understand your neighbour. If you can have a respect and acceptance for the person in front of you, behind you, and the other side of you, and if everybody can have that sense of safety and security, because at the end of the day, all this racially motivated violence, all the tension that happens between faiths and stuff, it all comes down to fear and misunderstanding. If we can eliminate that fear and that misunderstanding, then we're going to create a better Australia, aren't we? I've been working with the Burundara Interfaith Network. One of the events that they did last year was What is Faith in My Generation? And we had about 40 people there. It was a closed-door invitation event. And what it found was that the older generation felt that the younger generation didn't care. The younger generation felt that the older generation did things the wrong way, that they were babying them, that they felt that they had no respect. And what this talk did for the 40 people that were there was make them realise how in tune they actually were with each other. And how there was so much misunderstanding between the generations that had been leading to this animosity towards each other. The old fuddy-duddies, they have no idea what they're doing. Oh, the younger generation, they just have no respect. They have no care. And it's amazing the Year 10s telling us how important faith was playing in their life. I think the middle generation is the one that sort of missed out on a lot of that. But the younger generation are realising that faith gives them the sense of confidence, the sense of belonging, and also pathways towards stress management that are going to help them later on in life. And it was a really comforting experience for all the people that were involved to realise that they can be of use and they will find their way. Eventually, we all find our way. Right? And I think that faith generational exchange needs to happen more. And incidentally, the Burundara Interfaith Network are having an interfaith concert at the Augustine Centre on the 23rd of February. So everyone is invited to come along. 6:30, there's going to be some food provided there. Please get in touch with the Burundara Interfaith Network if you're interested in coming. And there are such activities, not just in Burundara, but all the different councils and a lot of the different interfaith organisations are organising such events. And I think to urge people to get involved. Even if it's just to come and look-see. You don't have to believe in a religion to get involved. But even if you don't believe in God or believe in a particular faith or religion, if you have an understanding of this, it is going to make you a better person.
That's all for our program today. For more information, and if you want to see this episode again, visit our website, harmonyindiversity.net. Goodbye for now.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allahu
Now it's time for a quick reminder of programs coming up tonight on MELfeed.video, so please stay with us.
This program is proudly sponsored by Overload Poetry Inc., producers of the Melbourne Overload Poetry Festival, and by Westward Poetry, the Western Suburbs' premier poetry reading.
Let the film turn before it touches the moment. Let the motorcade stop, drift backward down the plaza. Let the jetliner freeze, meters short of the tower, flow back out of the frame like a toy wing at the sling's limit. Let the black plumes billowing from the edifice be re-inhaled to unmask the blue. Let the bullet thread with a thud back in the barrel, crouching in the gateway. The victim clinch his scarf and vanish within. Let the high sniper crawl from his perch, crabble back down the fire escape. The drunken messenger lift his stone boot from the pedal, his machine veer backward from the X. Let the sirens wail diminish again. Let the smoke be sucked back, the ovens clang open. Let the battalions pause on their relentless march. The battleships heave about, the bombs plunge upward. Let the tanks unroll, let the stormtroops halt, pummel grotesquely backward down the boulevard. Let the proud man-children in camouflage watch their rifles fetched back from their palms. The proud, inflamed, barefoot boy-children receive their stones flung back in their fists. Let fists unfurl, let hearts. Let every prayer open with Amen. Each breath be the ending of a prayer without words. Let words unravel and all manner of thoughts and things done and undone. Let the moment be immaculate and true, untouchable as a dream. And let the days unfold and fold back again so that as we awaken and begin to forget the dream, we remember the moment.
I just want to say, most of you know, I think there is war between Iraq and Iran from 1980 to 1988. I've been there. It was just a very hard time for us. It's beginning when I was just, I think, 10 or 11 years old. And I reached it because I was 18 there. And I reached about more than 1 year. And the people was tired from that. And so they tried to sneak off it because there's nowhere to fight for nothing. So there are some people actually sneak away, like escape from army. They don't like to go there. So, but there is checkways everywhere. So you have to make fake ID if you're smart to pass or the checkpoint, and or there is other, and you know, Saddam everywhere. So they give hard actually laws. So some people find a way, like they drink a lot, use Valium, they stable it with a drink and broken their hand so they can get a few days holiday, I mean legal holiday, so because they broken their hand or they make it by mistake, or and to sneak up, because if they escape they maybe will get suicide or something. So this was a lot of way the people make it, even to harm themselves just to get legal out of war. So it's called maybe life in other ways, and I've been that. I've been experiencing this way. ربما حياة على نحو آخر. ربما سأولد من جديد أكمل كل مراحل الدراسية المقررة كتلميذ متفوق ومهذب، ثم أكون موظف في دائرة ما، موظف أنيق لا يتأخر عن الدوام ولا عن متطلبات زوجته، لا يعرف الخمر ولا السجائر، بعين باردة ينظر إلى العالم يتحطم على الصحف اليومية، لا يعرف مخيمات اللجوء والهويات المزورة، لن يكسر ساعده الأيمن بعد أن يحتسي قنينة خمر ويلتهب حفنة من حبوب الفاليوم، عله يحصد إجازة بضعة أيام أو أشهر يقضيها في شوارع الله. من يدري، ربما سأولد من جديد موظف يتابع واجبات طفليه المدرسية بعد الدوام الولد يصبح مهندسا والابن دكتورا، ثم يحال على التقاعد ويموت. All right. Now by English. Maybe life in other ways. Maybe I will be born again, complete all the studies as a well-mannered and a superior student. Then I will be a manager in some office. And a legit manager, never late off for his work nor the requirement of his wife. He doesn't know alcohol nor cigarette. With cold eyes looking at the word disintegration in the daily newspaper. He doesn't know fake ID, doesn't break his right arms after drinking a bottle of spirit and handful of Valium, so he can get a few months holiday, spend them roaming. Who knows? Maybe I will be born again, legend manager, helping his kids with their homework after work, the boy becoming an engineer and the girl a doctor. Then he retires and dies.
I've witnessed men of great courage do extraordinary things. Men who've sacrificed their lives to save yours. George Bennett's one of those men. When I broke my leg in 3 places, George picked me up. When I'd given up, George carried me. I wouldn't be here without him.
Here you go, Jack.
George.
Home visits and aged care are just some of the ways the RSL helps our veterans. Buy a badge or donate at anzacappeal.com.au.
Here are some brilliant news for adults who have difficulties with spelling, reading a newspaper or phone bill, or writing letters and emails. It can be easier to improve your reading and writing skills than to keep putting it off. Take the plunge. Call the Reading Writing Hotline, 1300 655 06.
1300 655 06.
It could change your life.
Come on, fellas. Let's get down there.
Hang on. Where's Dave?
Oh, hey, fellas. What do you think? Pretty cool, eh?
Real men look out for each other. Don't let your mates drink and drown.
I think it's something that really matters for us all to be here together tonight. Lots of things matter. The old roof creaking in the rain, a moth fussing about under the light, a mug of gold steam on a windy night, the impermanence of tunnels, a line of type, and the face inspecting itself like a stranger. Bitterness when it slants across the blade of the years. Love, of course. uninvited tears, a letter from a faraway friend, long thought lapsed, the stars in a child's eye, the trust in its hand, music, sharp apples, the rent, a miniature wooden box given as a memento in which nothing is kept, paper, wine, the Mobius mystery of sex, flaws, forgiven yourself, a good bed, slept in, several books waiting patiently, 20 years, a pen quietly leaking, old pain, the old fears creaking.
Just to say, I was in Baghdad. Yeah, don't go now. Yeah, I was from February. Yeah, from February and March, April. I just say about 10 weeks there. So I wrote haikus from Baghdad in haikus highs. Yeah. So about more than 120 haikus to describe what's going on there. Yeah, and I got a few copies of them if someone wants. But I will read some of them, but before that I will read the old haiku, which I read it. Yeah, this is all the stuff, and it's haiku or Rocco anyway. Bin Laden, Ben Bosch, before every war and after every meal, both, thank God. We thank God before every meal and after every bomb, still alive. So I didn't say I just gonna read by English because, yeah. Very cloudy morning, sunshine wakes me up, my daughter. Your eye hugging all of us, Noah's Ark. This one for Shakespeare. Electronic age, we make love over the internet. No more tragedy like Romeo and Juliet. Well, I don't know when I run out, if this way for me. I don't know the time. Yeah. And I only just a few haiku from this my book, what I make. Yeah. What I read? All right. It's from Baghdad. If you drive a war to the USA Army by mistake, you get shot. If they drive toward you by mistake, also you get shot. The sun falling behind the horizon can't distinguish between the Apache and the bird. Well, that, hold on. It's when I finish? That's one. Yeah. Okay. Apache has torn the feature of the moon. The power cut off, no candles to go to the toilet. More than 2 months in Baghdad, didn't see butterfly. Have a drunk line, meditate the ceiling, car explosion in my head. The TV channels more than the tourists. All of them love the country. No one say the truth. I saw about 50 victims when the car exploded. 22, they announced on the TV. I swear to myself, write a haiku after every drink. Changed my mind after every bottle. That's just a couple of them. The power cut off last March. Last March, looking for my Tumblr. The power cut off my daughter cries, afraid sound of Apache. After 8 p.m., only USA tank on the road. The drunk afraid to sing. My glass was rising, the power cut off. Never miss my mouth. Yeah, I think all right.
You're there when they can't sleep. You're there when they forget. But who's there when they're at school? Asthma can be serious. It affects 1 in 10 Australians and claims 400 lives each year. Does anyone at your school know what to do in an asthma emergency? Log on to asthmafriendlyschools.org.au and find out if your school is asthma friendly. Shouldn't every school be asthma friendly?
You teach us strangers are dangerous. But someone we know is a much more likely threat. You teach us strangers are dangerous. But who will help when you're not around? Create a world without unnecessary fear. Prepare, don't scare.
Hot water storage tanks can be a breeding ground for Legionnaire's disease bacteria. You can catch Legionnaire's disease by inhaling small droplets of infected water during showers or other activities. To prevent this from happening, you should never reduce the temperature setting. Tank temperature should be left as set by your plumber. Or eliminate the problem completely with a tankless gas hot water system. For more information, visit healthyhotwater.com.au.
This next poem is called Some Precepts of Postmodern Mourning. There must be a body, but there needn't be. The body must be remembered with some fondness. There must be at least 2 eulogists, and a third must have been detained by traffic or a death, and the service must proceed. Sex must be mentioned, but preferably not, except at the wake or the séance, when most words are permissible again. On second thought, this precept needn't apply. But at least one text must be read from, preferably composed by the body and significant. It must include expletives, but needn't do so. Everyone must look dignified and important, or at least significant. Move deliberately but not heavily. Smile but laugh once only. Black must be avoided, except in socks and sunglasses, which must be worn during the service as well as outside afterwards. There must be at least a reference to Celtic poetry or Jewish ancestry, and both testaments must be drawn upon. Someone must remark, "I still can't believe it," and then, "Yes, I can." And someone must respond with a philosophical but solicitous lift of an eyebrow. One of the mourners must be overheard to whisper, "I'm surprised she didn't come, though it doesn't surprise me." It must be noted that the body could never suffer fools gladly, and someone must observe how much he or she is only now learning about the body. Someone must say at least one Italian thing, either to the mourners or to the body, but a French or German or Latin or Spanish or Sanskrit thing will do, or a thing in any other accredited language, provided the expression is significant. There must be no public mysticism, though there may be, and coffee or white wine must be served afterwards. Someone needs to be squinting tears, preferably a large man in a double-breasted suit with a crimson kerchief protruding rudely, coupled with a pallid pusillanimous niece with a weak chin and beatific smile nodding with significance. Reincarnation must be accepted by at least half the mourners, but not mentioned. though strange omens and premonitions over recent weeks must be seen as significant in retrospect. The body must be understood to be pleased with the service. The simple dignity and grace of the occasion, the Baroque cantata, the words, the weather, everything must be just so. Everything must be significant, though in the end it needn't be. Later, this in itself must be acknowledged as most significant of all, or at least put down to the quintessential irony of death.
About 10 years ago, I actually attended a liturgical workshop that I saw. It was basically advertised on a flyer, and I was really interested in learning about the liturgy. So I attended this workshop, and I was the only female there, and the actual tutor or the teacher was like incredulous. What are you doing here? There were about 20 guys, and they wouldn't look me in the face. Apparently I had shamed the Greek Orthodox faith by being there. So the next piece, I'll finish with the next piece, which it's an old piece, but it's my answer to the boys of that workshop, basically. The grandmother's liturgy. Η λειτουργία της γιαγιάς. Η ζωή εν τάφο, η ζωή εν τάφο. In the well of silence, echoes of childhood, reminders of destiny, creep back. So far away from the ancient Greek gospel, smells of incense, framed icon faces. So far away from my old home. As the last leaf clings to the withered tree, making its final prayer, in the well of silence, echoes of childhood, reminders of destiny, creep back. Η ζωή εν τάφο, η ζωή εν τάφο, so far away from, η ζωή εν τάφο. Thanks.
We were supposed to have one more poet tonight, and unfortunately he couldn't make it. Khalid Al-Hali couldn't make it, but we do have his poetry, and that's important, and we have a number of poets to come up and read Khalid's poems.
This poem is called Vegetables. It's obviously by Khalid, and it's translated by Dr. Ragid Nahas. It's in 5 parts. I'm reading the first 2. 1. These doors cannot shut out the wind. My heart is rain. My paths are trees. The scarves are dust. There is fire beyond this dark tunnel. The windows, planted by the sun alongside the doors, come to me, drizzle and waiting. I was hung between the hand of death and the moment. I became the orbit. O vastness! Take me towards my face. Submerge me in the details lost in forgetfulness. Inside the pit of my years, my lip has become a ship. My blood has become oceans. My first dream is gypsy. My mouth is mad. My head turns with the clock, buried by the fire of questions. As much as I am ignorant of how long my blood kept flying with abandoned miracles and how I manipulated my closed life, I am tonight ignorant of myself. 2. My face ascends when my homeland sinks in it and the ships disappear. Among the whispers of the wind to the wind, I saw the roads giving 2 sides to the game. Paths for life and paths for death.
3.
Should the face return to the mirror, the forest of fear shall cry, and the door of darkness shall return to the finger. They have drawn eyes in the face and life in the heart. On the wall they had left a notion of hope that slept in my eyes for a while, then died. I returned to the mirror paralyzed. My face is its demise, and my longing is its face. When my voice felt this loneliness, it left this life and flew away. 4. A word dropped by the night in my way rolled me towards rivers of tar. When I was there, I sadly washed myself with the sand and the birds on the banks, and I shrouded myself with a week long of days that became my memory, haunted by forgetfulness, so that I regained my way. Then today I return begging my present life. 5. I mere numbers in the room of riddles, symbols of multiplication and divisions, doubling, reducing, subtracting, summing, as I add up the years of life in my mind. I become the paper, buried under millions of papers. The iris died under my eyelids. It's an honor to read Khalid's poem.
This is the final Khalid poem. It's called Nightmare. When I looked in the mirror, water was flowing, chatter was spraying, another handful of death and memories yearning. A door opens my lanterns to darkness. The door is morning. If I leave my face behind, the wind shall call me, and death shall call my face. As I depart my eyes, the heaven comes to me, an exile in my feet, digging a sound, and a song in my blood, carrying a death. Thank you.
This program was proudly supported by our sponsors.
Behind every great athlete, there is a great support network. Australian Athletes with a Disability and Wheelchair Sports Australia help athletes realise their full potential.
Gonna go from 3, yes!
No matter their ability, we're there to support them. Sporting opportunities for all abilities. For more information, visit sports.org.au.
Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Daddy's gonna sing you a lullaby. When you're sleeping safe and sound, you've got the proudest dad in town. I remember when I first saw you, your heart beating as you grew. We'll read you stories to help you dream. Your mommy and I are a perfect team. I can't wait to hear you sing or watch as you put on a wedding ring. One day you'll have children too. Remember the times I sang to you.
MELfeed.video.
Welcome to Transit. I'm Jacqueline Shields and I'm in Bendigo in front of all things a double-decker bus. That's right, an authentic bus from London, and we're going to be taking a trip around Bendigo and experiencing the delights of this country town on the London Bus Company's double-decker bus. I'm joined by Tim Borchers, the proprietor of the London Bus Company, and these buses have travelled a fair distance to get to Bendigo.
Yes, we've got a couple of buses that have come over from the main areas of London and a couple are from Plymouth.
So they're actually authentic?
Yes, well, we've got two that are completely genuine. The other two are sort of had a few alterations in Australia.
What would those alterations have involved?
Well, mainly to keep the engine cooler, because the engine was overheating because it's a lot warmer climate, and also the windows, all the windows open, every single window to try and keep the people cooler.
So in London, the windows don't open?
In London, they've got little tiny slits in the windows that open, but it's a much, much cooler climate.
So where did you come up with the concept of having double-decker buses around the heartland of Bendigo?
Well, in Bendigo and in Ballarat too. I've been involved with the tramways here since I was about 11 years old, and I could see there was a big market for visitors. The trams didn't really service enough, and then when I was travelling overseas I saw these double-decker buses everywhere, and I thought, what a great idea for Bendigo and for Ballarat. We have two main parts of the business. One's a City Circle Heritage Tour in Bendigo and Ballarat, and it does regular circuits of the town for visitors with a full commentary. The other part of the business, I suppose, is the party hire, and we have a lot of fairly interesting and entertaining parties, a couple of nights of the week, all the time on the buses.
So what would some of those more interesting and entertaining parties incorporate?
Oh, well, things like everything from maybe a probus or a church group outing. We had a Let's Get Nude party.
Would you like to expand on that one?
No, I wouldn't. And we had...
because the windows are open and it's very visual.
That's right, and I think the theme of the night was Let's Get Nude, and that's what a lot of the things that were happening. But that's another side of the business here.
Tim, could you give us some information about the City Circle Heritage Tour, please?
Yes, well, it operates in Bendigo and in Ballarat, and what it does, it covers all the main visitor attractions in both cities with stops there. You can hop on at any one of the stops, buy a daily ticket, and use the bus to hop on or off during the day. So you get to see everything, haven't got the stress of driving, or if you haven't got a car, using public transport, which is a great idea, by the way, you can use the bus. Plus, there's a full... not quite a commentary, more an audio guide. It's a fully produced audio guide with perhaps a dozen different voices, skits, sound effects to explain Bendigo and Ballarat's heritage and also its present of the cities.
So what sort of attractions are there?
Well, I suppose if you come to Ballarat, there's Sovereign Hill, there's the main city area, and the Lydiard Street precinct. Lake Wendouree is a place you could almost spend the day at. The Great Southern Woolshed, the Wildlife Park, quite an interesting park, and the brand new Eureka Interpretive Centre.
And you can get to all these places on the buses?
Yeah, on the buses you sure can. And in Bendigo there's the Central Deborah Gold Mine, our main city centre, which is also an historic precinct, the Golden Dragon Museum, and the new Chinese Gardens, which are quite beautiful, Lake Waroona, the Bendigo Pottery, and the Science and Discovery Centre.
Tim, what do you think the fascination is with English double-decker buses in Australia, which is so far away? I know we've got the British heritage, but I think still today it's definitely an attraction.
It's an oddity, yes, because they're fairly rare in the country still. Their size and shape, and the fact that, you know, to get them up to scratch, because the regulations and the safety rules are very strict now, and we're governed by the same rules as a brand new coach. So a lot of work is spent on the safety side. We have yearly inspections, and it's very difficult to do and expensive, so not many people are doing it. So because they're so rare, we're doing it. Plus, the way we operate our buses, say for our party hires, they can be at their own party at 1 o'clock in the morning. A double-decker bus will pull up with their type of music blaring, and then they hop on and away we go. It's a mobile party. So it's something completely different.
Would you say that Bendigo is actually growing as far as the attractions are concerned, and there's more for tourists to see, more input into the city as far as developing the attractions, the historical attractions?
I think that the local tourism bodies in both Ballarat and Bendigo are doing a great job making people aware, especially in the metropolitan centres, that there's so much to see and do in Bendigo and Ballarat. And I think that the attraction operators are picking their game up, becoming more professional.
With regard to actually getting on the bus, where would you suggest people sit? Up the front, up the top there, or at the back, or if it's a cold day, maybe behind the motor? Or?
Well, the best seats in the bus, and I suppose the scariest seats in the bus too, are upstairs at the front. A few years ago when I learned to drive them, I did a shift sitting upstairs in the front seat, which I thought was going to be a waste of time, but perhaps was the scariest day of my life.
Why was that?
Well, you know, it's sort of, you go very close to trees and poles and it sort of rocks around a fair bit, and my trainer did it specifically to let me know what it was like sitting upstairs at the front.
And with regard to actually getting a job down here on the bus, if anybody's interested in being a bus driver, is it a bus driver?
Yes, bus driver. We have bus drivers and bus conductors.
Whereabouts would you learn? On the job? Are there courses you can do, or...?
Yes, I suppose it's one of those jobs we like experience, a trained driver. However, we've trained our own drivers here, but normally preference is given to people with some experience, and then we take them for a number of hours to try and get them used to the height of the vehicle, which is fairly high.
That was the nature of the question, I suppose, the fact that it's not your average everyday bus. I mean, you've got that added height, so what would the difference be with regard to driving this type of double-decker bus?
It's extreme. It's 4.4 metres, all our buses, which is the highest vehicle you can have without a permit. Plus our vehicles are operating around cities and side streets, and we have a lot of problems with trees and power wires, and really the drivers have to look up and live.
What about with regard to bridges? You'd have to know the city quite well, wouldn't you? Yeah,
there's a couple of close ones that when we first started, we drove through them late at night with one person keeping an eye on the bridge, another person driving the bus, but we pretty well know all the bridges around the area. Sometimes when we're empty, sometimes we'll just touch the brakes so the front of the bus just noses under it a bit more gently. Once you're full, the bus sits right down, but care.
For a tourist to the area, what sort of times can you expect? Like, when can you flag down a bus and jump on?
The City Circle Heritage Tour operates in Bendigo and Ballarat, you know, two of, in the gold days, two of Victoria's richest cities, every day except for Christmas Day. There's between 2 and 7 services operating a day, depending whether it's a school, public holiday or just a normal weekday.
So we have a Melbourne Cup Day you can jump on?
Yes, Melbourne Cup Day is a very busy day because a lot of people who don't go to the Cup come to the country.
Chicken and champagne breakfast there?
Yes, we have a lot of people hiring the buses for a chicken and champagne or cocktail evening or progressive dinner. You move 66 people around on a progressive dinner. But the City Circle Heritage Tour is perhaps the flagship. It's the real introduction for the visitors.
Tim, when the bus is full, but you've got people who tend to prefer to go upstairs, how do you know what exactly is going on?
Well, with the old buses, all old double-deck English-type buses have got periscopes like a submarine. So from the driver's seat through a series of mirrors, I can actually see every passenger upstairs, which sometimes can be unusual and surprising to the people that are up there.
So you basically got eyes in the back of your head, so to speak?
I can see all around the bus, every seat upstairs and downstairs.
Whereabouts is the periscope?
It's just above the driver's head. Only the driver can see it. It's all designed to be at the right angle. But
or is that a secret?
No, it's above the driver's head, so when I'm sitting here driving, I can just quickly glance upwards and see all the seats upstairs.
So everybody's safe and sound?
Safe and sound, make sure they're sitting down, doing roughly the right thing, yes.
Tim, which of the services do you prefer to be involved with?
They're all a lot of fun, but I suppose the flagship service that the London Bus Company operates would be the City Circle Heritage Tour. We get so many great comments and people thanking us, and in fact, do you want to come along for a trip?
Love to.
Okay, let's go then.
On our left, the town hall. Its elaborate interior and fashionable staircase, combining with its sheer size, justified its cost to the city of £18,000 in the early 1870s.
Brings 10 weeks of performing arts, while the Ballarat Opera Festival and Eureka Jazz Festival have built enthusiastic followings.
Built in 1900. best example of large-scale Edwardian flamboyant architecture.
When they're ready.
The street we're about to cross is Harvard Street. Started in 1947 by Tom Dawson, it quickly developed into Australia's leading business construction and centre. Has a fascinating collection of classic cars which lets you experience firsthand the nostalgia of our motoring history. There is an admission charge to the Motor Museum. Please check the time of the next bus in your brochure before getting off. And if you'd like more information, just ask the driver.
Well, I trust you enjoyed that tour around Bendigo on one of the London Bus Company's fantastic double-decker buses. And you may as well be in London today with regard to the weather. It's a little bit dismal, so I think to warm up, in keeping with the theme, we might pop into one of the local pubs, have a bit of a Guinness, and enjoy the afternoon whiling away with a game of darts.
MELfeed.video.
Are you ready? Transports of Distant Delight number 6 is about to blow your mind. Welcome back, folks. And be warned, the test gauge is sizzling. Presenting the fabulous 6th and final edition in this series of Transports of Distant Delight. I told you it was fabulous. Thumbs up for Transports of Distant Delight. And farewell. This is the last of the series.
What? No more Transports of Distant Delight?
Thank you, Darren.
I didn't think this could happen in Toowoomba. And then I saw it on TV that night. It really opened my eyes.
Whenever the community comes to us and says we need your help, we do whatever we can to assist.
It is a great feeling to be able to help your neighbours, to be able to help your community.
Each Lions member and each Lions club in different parts of the country, we're totally different. But we have core values that are the same. They remain the same for any Lions member and any Lions club anywhere in not just Australia but around the world.
Anything that you can think of that you want to do and support and help, Lions are doing it right now somewhere in this world.
I think Lions need to tell their story. They need to let people know the amazing things that they do.
The three major streams that we have in Lions are the community service that we do for the public, health and medical research, and the disaster relief.
We're out there to help people. If you love helping people, get out and help and join a Lions Club.
We started this project about 20 years ago. All this gear would normally go to the tip. We recycle it and give it to someone less fortunate and where it is needed in the world.
Being a Lion here in Australia means that I can make a difference to my community. But most importantly, it's inspiring other people to get out and be part of their community and make it a safer and a much happier and better place to live.
Childhood cancer, I've always been interested in cancer and small children from the time I first got cancer 30 years ago. Research is an indefinite item. You can't see it, but it helps so much.
I'm here managing the money and the relationships, but other people are out there raising funds and bringing in community support. Without all of us working together, we can't affect change.
2 more extra hands at any function, any working bee, anything we do, 2 more hands can help us raise more funds, can help us serve our community better.
I went to my Lions Club and I said, I got this idea and I think it's a little bit crazy, but I think we could raise some serious money doing it. And it was to run 100 kilometres. And the club said, okay, if you want to do this, whatever you need us to do, we'll be there 100%. And I'm pretty proud to say that together we raised just over $16,000. So we blew the target out of the water, and I think that was due to a lot of the support that I got.
through my leadership training and all that, I've learned about thinking global, acting local, and Lions Club is definitely that kind of thing. They act within their communities, but the money that they raise can often end up in any corner of the world.
As an individual, I could only do so much, and whilst it was my burning desire to try and help these people, having an organisation such as the Lions family to call upon to support me and those people that were working with me just made it possible for us to achieve so much more.
You know, after the devastation, to come back into the community, you know, you were shattered by what you saw. You know, no police station, no post office, no petrol station, you know, no kindergarten. There was nothing here.
And all that water with an unstoppable.
I don't know that I've ever seen as much as arrived. There were fridges, washing machines, dryers. There was toasters, jugs, just everything.
To be invited to be a part of Lions just opened up a whole new world to me. A world that provided a structured organisation that could see that the hours that I volunteered could achieve so much more.
I think Lions is a wonderful organisation. The people in it have charity in their hearts.
I can go anywhere in this country, see somebody with a Lions badge, walk up to them and say, "G'day, you got a friend."
Never once in my life had I had a group of people where I could go to, say anything, and know that no matter what, they would be there, they would stand by me.
It's the family. That's what we call it. It's the Lions family. Without Lions, I think I'd be lost now because they've been my life.
We work hard, but the most important thing is we have fun.
The fellowship of all the members of the club, the broader community, it's just a tremendous organisation to belong to. You know, I'll be here till I die.
It is extremely rewarding and gratifying to be a part of an organisation that can spread its support so far and wide.
More members means more hands, means more support to the community.
I would encourage everyone just to give it a go and see if it is for them, because the return that you get for giving to others is amazing.
Get out there, do something wonderful, be part of this fantastic organisation.
MELfeed.video.
Welcome to the CEC Report for the 20th of March 2018. I'm Elisa Barwick, and joining me today is CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa.
And on today's show, breakthrough for Glass-Steagall in Australia, and Syria and Russia lies unravel, expect threats to escalate. So firstly today, very good news, breakthrough for Glass-Steagall in Australia. Now, there really is a political shockwave sweeping this country at the moment, Craig, as a result of the various truths that are being exposed by the Royal Commission. Now, let me just say that over the last year, it's been rather extraordinary to see the shifts that have happened, because remember, June last year, you had the Parliament that was voting on a parliamentary inquiry into the banks and came within one vote. In fact, it was the casting vote of the Speaker of the House that prevented that happening. And the next thing that really was a fatal mistake was that surreptitiously and quietly the government, a couple of months later, tried to sneak through legislation not to rein in the banks, which the population and parliamentarians were demanding, but to give APRA and the banks more powers under a crisis situation to seize deposits, to seize other kinds of investments in banks, the bail-in bill, which we famously fought.
Of course,
now,
APRA, Lisa, is the regulator. It's supposed to be overlooking the banks. But as we've said many times in our publications, it's actually allowed the banks to get away with all sorts of criminality that's now been exposed.
Exactly. Now, our campaign on bail-in was then the critical factor because it led to the demand coming from Parliament for a parliamentary commission to investigate that legislation, and that allowed us to mobilise the population to really draw out the fervour to rein in the banks, and the government basically jumped before they were pushed on the Royal Commission at that point because the banking establishment were completely freaked out at where this would go. So, given all that, put the Royal Commission into the context of what now is coming out in these various hearings. Government MPs all of a sudden are saying, oh, we were wrong to oppose the Royal Commission. This bank behaviour is disturbing. The government today is talking tough new penalties, greater fines, and bankers even doing jail time. Finance Minister Matthias Cormann yesterday, said that if the Commissioner were to ask for more time for his Royal Commission, you can safely assume the government would accept that request. So this is a big shift. Now, in that context, Craig, the CEC is very happy to announce that the Federal Member of Parliament for Kennedy in Queensland, Bob Katter, is going to table a private member's bill for Glass-Steagall legislation in Australia.
Yeah, that's right, Elisa. This is very good news. We've written the legislation for this bill that people can call in and get a copy of. And look, what it does is effectively introduces an Australian version of Glass-Steagall. And what does it do? Glass-Steagall means you separate out the commercial banking system, what we call the boring banking system. That's just the normal banks which go about banking business, like taking in deposits, issuing loans and mortgages and those sorts of things. That's all it does, and it looks after its own customers. And the deposits in that case are guaranteed, right? It's separated out from all the other issues that we've been hearing, all the criminality, the insurance, I should say, aspects, the stockbroking, all of this sort of stuff, derivatives, speculation from the merchant investment banking side. That's all broken up. So what this bill does, it specifically brings into Australian context how that can be done. Secondly, and most importantly, it puts APRA, the regulator that's been responsible for overseeing all this criminality and all the problems that are coming up, under the purview of Parliament. So it cannot be dictated by foreign organisations like the Bank of International Settlements and the International Financial Stability Board. It has to look first and foremost for its direction from the Australian people. So Bob Katter is introducing this bill. I happen to have read his book. I found it a fascinating book. People should get to read it because Bob comes from an area where Ted Theodore, the very famous former Treasurer of Australia, comes from. And Ted Theodore, back in the Depression, tried to solve the Depression by introducing what's called a fiduciary note issue of £18 million at that point to fund 50,000 jobs. Now, that would have broken the back of the Depression. So Bob Katter has a lot to say about Ted Theodore in his book. He supports the idea of national banking. He's made speeches in Parliament that people can go and look at. And you'll see that this is not something for Bob Katter that is out of the normal. This is part and parcel of what he's been campaigning for a long time.
Yeah, he was one of the key people pushing for the parliamentary inquiry into the banks all along, leading the way. Now, he needs people to back him up. He needs MPs to second this and to support it, to get it through the Parliament. So we have one job for you this week, for all of our viewers and supporters out there. Call your Member of Parliament and to demand that he or she support this bill or second this bill.
Yeah, this is the key, Elisa. Right now it's back to the hands of the people. If you want to actually have real reform in this country, start to get active. Otherwise, look, the politicians that say, oh, the bank's behaviour was disturbing, why are they protecting the banks?
Yep, exactly. Now, we've got to take a quick break, but right after this, we're going to talk about a number of other voices that are now calling for Glass-Steagall in this environment.
Playing the 80s on Air FM 88.0.
Hi, this is Darren McAlane from Air FM Drive. Join me from 3 to 6 p.m every afternoon on 88.0 in Penrith, and also you can catch me on tunein.com. That's from 3 to 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time.
Playing the 80s on Air FM 88.0.
My name is Logan. I'm 12 years old and I have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. My muscles are degenerating and I was put into a wheelchair 2 years ago. Soon I won't be able to move at all. The majority of people affected will not live past their 20s, including me. So we need your support to improve our quality of life until a cure is found.
No one knows what to say.
I try and treat him the same as I always have.
He didn't want to give up. He just couldn't.
Caring for Catherine was tough, but when I look back, it was the best thing we ever did together.
It's hard to know how to talk about dying. These people know. If you need to know how, visit lifeanddeath.org.au and join the conversation.
Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're talking about the breakthrough for Glass-Steagall in Australia at the moment. And of course, the various home truths that are coming out of this Royal Commission are really driving an awakening, not just among the population, most of whom already knew this, but amongst the leaders across the country who have been told that our banks are so safe and stable, and they're beginning to realise this is lies. So some of what's been coming out include banks lying and hiding their misconduct from regulator. I mean, AMP admitted lying 20 times to ASIC. Well, that's what they're at least telling us. Banks trapping customers in high fees, high risk investments, charging for services not rendered, charging people after they died for years, decades. So this is incredible stuff. Now, on Monday morning, Craig, as the Royal Commission began its second round of hearings here in Melbourne, we and some of our supporters and from other groups had a rally out the front of the Royal Commission hearings there in Melbourne. And we're going to show a couple of quick clips from both you and from a Bank Reform Now representative from the ground Monday morning.
Hi, Benjamin Pearce here for the CEC Report. We're at the Law Courts here in Melbourne for the second round of hearings for the Banking Royal Commission. I've got Dario Pappalardo here from Bank Reform Now. Dario?
Yeah, good morning.
All right, can you tell us a little bit about why you're here today?
Well, look, many of the issues, obviously with the banks, we're here to represent many victims who have been done over very badly by the banks. And obviously we're here to voice our concerns about APRA, who are not doing their job and policing the banks and really coming down on them, like a ton of bricks.
And what do you think the Commission should be focusing on with respect to APRA?
Look, the Commission should initially broaden the terms of reference. The 12 months, obviously, length for the Royal Commission is not sufficient. They should be fully investigating the activities, the crimes that obviously the banks are up to. So we're here to basically, try and voice our concerns.
All right, well, thank you for being part of the rally today.
Yeah, I'll be here.
And we'll make sure we get the message out. Thank you. Hi, Benjamin Pearce here for the CEC Report. We're out the front of the Law Courts for the Banking Royal Commission, the second round of hearings. We've got Craig Isherwood, leader of the CEC here. Craig, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
And what can you tell us about this rally we're holding here today?
Look, Ben, the issue is that APRA hasn't been able to put under any scrutiny whatsoever by this Royal Commission, because it was written out of the terms of reference by the Prime Minister when it started as an absolute scandal. Look, APRA oversaw many of the atrocities that the banking system suffered in the last 20 years, since 1998 in fact. So what we are calling for is an expansion of the Royal Commission. Right now, bring back APRA, put it on the stand. Look, if you go back and look at APRA's history, 2007 there was a report itself published, which we've come to know about, that documents how APRA itself is responsible for the mortgage fraud that's been taking place today, how it inflated and changed the regulation rules and so forth to benefit the banks. And you can see our sign at the back here, where we've got APRA as a shepherd herding the banks. Well, the fact is that the banks, the APRA doesn't represent the interests of the people. When it was established for two things: so-called to protect deposits, but also for financial stability. Now, what they don't tell people is that they're more interested in financial stability of the system, which means at the end of the day, they can look at bailing in deposits. Now, people say, oh, but the recent legislation that you guys campaigned on didn't include or give APRA the power to bail in deposits. We say that's a load of rubbish because they refused, absolutely refused, and the government refused to allow amendments to legislation to rule out that in the case of a crisis, people's deposits would not be touched. Now, APRA has that power. So here you have an organisation that watched over all the criminal activities that we've seen happen with the Commonwealth Bank and the money laundering and so forth. This organisation has to be put under the spotlight. It must be done so, otherwise this Royal Commission will be just a travesty of justice. And we'll have to call for another one. So Ben, that's what we're here for. We're just making a loud noise today for that reason. And we seem to be getting a lot of support out here at the moment, which is good.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to send a strong message while we're here today rallying to get APRA investigated by the Commission. Back to you at the show.
Now, in this environment, supercharged environment on the banks, Craig, just in the last few days alone, there's been a number of other people talking about Glass-Steagall or separating the banks, which is another way of describing it, or ending vertical integration, which is having all the various services under the one roof. Now, I'll go through them. We had Professor Alan Fells, the former ACCC chairman, the Australian Consumer Competition Council. He said, I believe the Royal Commission needs to look at structural separation as a possible remedy. This is usually far more effective than trying to regulate the behaviour of banks. And he did say it would require new legislation, but Mr. Fells, we've got it, we've written it, it's ready to go.
I wanted to say here, in our legislation, we're very specific about what banks can do and what they can't do. So all this stuff that you've got with vertical integration, right, all this corruption with the insurance company scams of charging people insurance they don't use, banks can't do that anymore.
No.
And the difference with our legislation as opposed to these general statements as we go through it, we're very, very specific on what banks can do as a bank and what they can't do.
Yeah.
And this is going to really lay the groundwork for a stable banking system.
Yep.
So this stuff doesn't come up anymore. This is
big...
what Glass-Steagall is about, specifying what a commercial bank is and how it will operate.
Yep. And so Fells went on, he said, separation should be an issue the Royal Commission addresses very directly if it's to stamp out this behaviour. So that's very good. Now, New South Wales National Senator John Wacker-Williams said today, I've been saying this for years. Vertical integration is wrong. I think the sooner that's broken up, the better. And even the Greens Treasury spokesperson, Craig, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who we had some run-ins around the bail-in legislation because he ultimately supported it, though he did say we should have a debate about Glass-Steagall because he knew that was the only thing that would make us and all the people that wrote to the Commission happy. So he commented on what Fell had to say, welcoming that. He said that tighter regulation simply won't be enough and that a vertical and horizontal breakup of the banks be seriously considered. And he said that Liberal and Labor should examine how a mandatory bank breakup might be implemented in a structured and ordered manner.
Yeah, when we wrote the legislation, Elisa, we had very much in mind, I think, the comments of some very high-ranking UK officials that said that if bankers are given a chance, they'll get between the wallpaper and the wall.
Yeah, they're very adept at it.
Very, very good at it. So we've got to be very clear on what banks can and can't do.
It's got to be watertight. Barnaby Joyce, who had opposed the Royal Commission, he came out saying banks should consider whether they should be in the financial planning business after the evidence has been delivered. It appears from evidence to be too much of a conflict of interest and a temptation for them. And various other government MPs have said similar things about, we didn't realise how bad it actually was. And there's increasing talk in the media about the fact that vertical integration will be coming to an end. What we want to stress is the culpability here of the government and the regulators. I mean, Scott Morrison, who said, we were already aware of all this, he has said today that the banks are still very strong and stable. There are no systemic issues that are identified or likely to be identified.
That's basically saying, Elisa, this is what we say about Royal Commissions. The government always tries to fix the result. So he's basically trying to tell people that there's not going to be any issues to find. But look, why is that? They already know that they've already put the fix in the terms of reference. That's why, as I've said on the video before outside the rally, the Royal Commission has to be expanded, and if it was allowed to be expanded, it would find the systemic problems.
That's right, exactly. Now, for more information, call in for a copy of our Australian Alert Service. If you haven't already done so, we'll send you a complimentary copy and even our legislation so you can read it. We'll be back in a minute.
Would your life be different if you chose to swim between the flags instead of that unpatrolled beach? If you'd checked the depth before you dived into shallow water, if you didn't swim under the influence of alcohol and chose not to swim at night, if you only listened to the lifesavers warnings.
Make the right choice this summer. Enjoy our beautiful beaches. Always swim between the red and yellow flags.
If we can't see you, we can't save you.
If you choose to text while driving,
you could ruin lives.
Someone else's, your family's, or your own.
Choose not to instead.
The right choice could save someone's life.
Proud supporters of safety in our community.
GMCU and Southern Cross Austereo.
Imagine not seeing the world you live in. Macular disease is Australia's leading cause of blindness. Donate now to Macular Disease Foundation Australia. Call 1800 111 709 or visit mdfoundation.com.au.
I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at 27.
I was 46.
I was 62.
The first symptom I noticed
Was loss of balance.
Was that I was always tired.
was a loss of smell.
The most difficult thing for me is not to be able to travel in my retirement.
The most difficult thing for me was giving up a career that I loved.
The hardest thing for my mum was being pregnant with me.
Welcome back to the CEC Report. Syria and Russia lies unravel, expect threats to escalate. So a week ago we saw the US, UK and France launching strikes against Syria and the Syrian government based on the supposed chemical weapons attack that had occurred in Douma. But they didn't wait for the results to be in, for the evidence to be in, and Theresa May, the British Prime Minister, in her speech tried to come at it from various angles of saying, you know, why we had no choice, etc. But as various analysts have made clear, there was no basis in international law for what she did. The only thing she could claim was a responsibility to protect, which is a vague doctrine that really has no basis in international law, and which has been disputed by Jeremy Corbyn, who has actually, the leader of the opposition, the Labor Party there, he has called for a War Powers Act to force future UK governments to seek approval from the Parliament, because what Theresa May has done is she has essentially used the Queen's royal prerogative to make this decision on her own. Now, the point is that if no proof actually emerges that this was the Syrian government behind this, or that there was an attack at all, it's going to get worse, because the perpetrators of this will have to cover up their tracks, probably with more distractions and diversions, namely bigger and worse attacks. And they're already beating the drums now about Russia conducting cyber warfare attacks on the UK. Now, what I want to do is go through and show some quick video clips of a number of high-level people across the world over the last week that have questioned whether Assad was behind these attacks or whether an attack took place at all. And we'll see very high-level people, senior figures such as Major General Jonathan Shaw, the former head of British Special Forces, Admiral Lord West, the former First Sea Lord, meaning the head of the British Royal Navy, Peter Ford, the former British Ambassador to Syria, US Senator Rand Paul, and also American economist Jeffrey Sachs. So we'll just roll those tapes.
I think anything what we've heard from either Sergei Lavrov or indeed the Russian ambassador has made it more difficult for the UK to launch any kind of attack without putting it to Parliament.
Yeah, I think quite apart from all that, the debate that seems to be missing from this is, and this was actually mentioned by the ambassador, was what possible motive might have triggered Syria to launch a chemical attack at this time in this place. The Syrians are winning. Don't take my word for it. Take the American military's word for it. General Virgil, the head of CENTCOM, he said to Congress the other day, Assad has won this war, and we need to face that. So, and then you got last week the statement by Trump, or the tweet by Trump, that America had finished with ISIL and we were going to pull out soon, very soon. And then suddenly you get...
Okay, I'm very sorry. You've been very patient waiting for us, but we do need to leave it there. I'm very sorry.
Yes, President Assad is in the process of winning this civil war, and he was about to take over and occupy Douma, all that area. He'd had a long, hard slog, slowly capturing that whole area of the city. And there, just before he goes in and takes it all over, apparently he decides to have a chemical attack. It just doesn't ring true. It seems extraordinary because clearly he would know that there's likely to be a response from the Allies. What benefit is there for his military? Most of the rebel fighters, this disparate group of Islamists had withdrawn. There were a few women and children left around. What benefit was there militarily in doing what he did? I find that extraordinary. Whereas we know that in the past some of the Islamic groups have used chemicals, and of course there would be huge benefit in them labelling an attack as coming from Assad, because they would guess quite rightly that there'd be a response from the US, as there was last time, and possibly from the UK and France.
It's not certain by any means that it was a chemical attack. There are reports from Western journalists who were in Douma yesterday, reports that they could find no folks who would confirm that there'd been a chemical attack. They went actually to the hospital where those videos were filmed. They spoke to doctors, named doctors, so this can be checked, who said that there was no chemical attack. What there was an ordinary bomb attack that had people streaming into the hospital with smoke inhalation problems. And what happened then was that the white helmets, that's the jihadi medical auxiliaries, started shouting gas, caused panic. Then everybody went into gas mode. They started with the hoses and the inhalers. Meanwhile, it was all being carefully videoed and put out by rich Arab country propagandists. And there's a distinct possibility that we have been deluded.
Well, I think before you talk about sanctions, we ought to talk about, what evidence is there that that Russia was complicit in this attack. In fact, for that matter, I still look at the attack and say, Assad either must be the dumbest dictator on the planet or maybe he didn't do it. I have yet to see evidence that he did do it. The intelligence agencies claim they have that evidence. But think about it. Does it make any sense? He's been winning the war for the last couple of years. The only thing that would galvanize the world to attack Assad directly is a chemical attack. It killed relatively few people compared to what can be killed with traditional bombs, traditional machine guns, traditional tanks. And so you wonder, really, what logic would there be for Assad to be using chemical weapons?
Right. And we know they sent in the CIA to overthrow Assad. The CIA and Saudi Arabia together in covert operations tried to overthrow Assad. It was a disaster. Eventually it brought in both ISIS as a splinter group to the jihadists that went in. So what I would plead to President Trump is get out. Like his instinct told him, by the way. That was his instinct. But then all the establishment, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Pentagon, everybody said, no, that's irresponsible. But his instinct is right. Get out. We've done enough damage, 7 years. And now we really risk a confrontation with Russia that is extraordinarily dangerous, reckless.
And by the way, Craig, the Russians actually warned on the 13th of March that there was preparations by the White Helmets and others on the ground in Damascus, which is where Douma is.
It's on Britain and America for our foreign policy.
So,
disgusting.
Get involved, call in for a copy of the alert to find out more, and call your MP and make sure they go with Glass-Steagall. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, Sarah, I'm going to order some pathology tests to see how everything's going.
Half the Australian population had a pathology test last year. That's you or someone you love. 100 tests are performed every minute, delivering vital medical information. From the moment you are born, your healthcare depends on pathology tests. 70% of medical decisions rely on information from pathology tests. Pathology is the engine room of healthcare. One small sample can reveal millions of insights all about you. Pathologists are your doctor's doctor. 25,000 people work to provide doctors with the answers they need to treat you. Australian pathology is world class. We may never meet you, but we see each of you as part of our family. Every minute, 23 Australians find out more about their health.
Good news, Sarah, the results show that everything's okay.
Pathology provides peace of mind.
I rely on Australian pathology.
Sign up online to support Australian pathology.
MELfeed video.
Here's our interview with our voiceover artist, Darren McElwain. Hi, this is MELfeed video. We're actually in Penrith, New South Wales at the moment with Darren McElwain, who is one of our voiceover artists who's helping us with some voice work on MELfeed. So you'll probably hear him, and you might even see him from time to time. We're talking about that, aren't we? So we might even see you occasionally.
Absolutely. I'm very, very excited about being part of this brand new project called MELfeed Video, and I guess I'm very honoured to be able to maybe use my voice to piece things together. I think that's going to be very exciting, and I guess it's going to be great to piece some of that vision together, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity to piece some of those historical pieces of online TV as well. So it's certainly a great opportunity for you and for me as well.
Yeah, so the purpose of MELfeed is to go back into some of the archives of some of the new and old, some of the new stuff, but some of the old stuff that community TV has produced, especially Northern Access Television and Metro TV, which we'll be doing some stuff with. So it should work out pretty well.
I think it's a very exciting project because I think as time goes on, some of these fantastic productions can get forgotten about, and I think it's really important that we archive those, we keep showing those things, and I think the greatest part about streaming TV is that people can relax and watch all the videos unfold as they take place, which is fantastic.
So what is some of the stuff that you've been up to with your voice work over the years?
Well, I'm very honoured that MELfeed are out here in Penrith. This is, I guess, my hometown. This is the home of great 80s music where Air FM, I guess, broadcasts. I do the drive time show here from 3 to 6, and I'm very excited about that. So I guess it's a great way to connect with the listeners, and I guess I've been, you've been able to hear my voice and see some of my things on YouTube, and I guess there's a bit of a history there with television and radio and theatre perhaps, but I'm more than honoured to be part of MELfeed Video at this stage.
So you're currently on a local open narrowcast station in the Penrith area, that's correct?
Absolutely. Here Air FM it broadcasts on 88.0 FM in Penrith, and I guess we mainly focus on the 80s music, and I guess I do the drive time show. So yes, we've got the 80s music but we've also got, we do the traffic and the weather, and more importantly, which is something I'm very excited about, is that we actually stream online on tunein.com, which is very exciting.
So you can find Air FM through the TuneIn app. So if you search, what is it, Air FM, you'll find it on the app?
Absolutely. Air FM on the TuneIn app. Just look for, I guess, the coloured logo for Air FM here in Penrith, which you can see the great backdrop of Penrith just behind me. And we broadcast 24/7 on, I guess, on 88.0, and you can also find us on tunein.com. Very exciting.
Yeah, so just look for the test pattern logo.
That's the one. It's the rainbow coloured one. That's exactly right. Fantastic.
Colour bars, I think it is. That's the technical term, isn't it?
That's the colour bars. I like that one. I'm gonna work with that this afternoon. The colour bars. I like it.
Yeah. So you're also a primary school teacher in the local area as well?
Absolutely. I've been working here in the area of South Penrith for 14 years, and I guess I bring primary teaching and journalism and voiceover acting all together in some format. So here in Penrith. So I'm very, very honoured that I'll be able to do a lot of these voiceovers for MELfeed here from Penrith. Very excited about that one.
So some of your talents have rubbed off on the kids too, apparently, you were telling us.
I hope that I bring some sort of inspiration in some way, and I guess they certainly, I don't always tell them what I do, but they go searching on YouTube and listening on the radio, and they have a listen to some of the great things that I do. So that's always nice of them to do that.
So they're getting introduced to some of the 80s music themselves, are they?
I think when they start playing them at discos, it's already a fact of, oh, that's something I've listened to on Air FM, which is very exciting. It's something they've heard before.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us anyway, and we'll look forward to working together in the future with this great project as it gets going.
Fantastic, Michael. I'm really honoured to be part of MELfeed.video, and more importantly, thank you for coming out to Penrith today. I'm very excited about that.
Okay, and possibly we might try and do some footage around Sydney while we're here. Obviously we're here in October, but we'll be broadcasting on this channel from November, so we'll see if we can do some little bits from around Sydney and a few different places.
Fantastic. Our viewers can join us and see lots of the great work that Michael does as well, which is fantastic.
Okay. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks very much for having me. We'll see you soon.
If a man's home is his castle, his shed is his kingdom. It's a place men can hang out with a few mates, build a few things, even if you haven't before, and give back to the community. No man should be without a shed. The Australian Men's Shed Association is working to provide a shed for all Australian men, and they have over 400 already. Visit your local shed, build your community, and make a difference. Find a shed near you. It's time to give back.
They say there's a chance I could die in a car crash. Maybe even from heart disease. Maybe even skin cancer.
I could die in a work-related accident, or I could die in a fight.
The fact is, the biggest cause of death for men in my age group is suicide.
Please don't let this happen to me.
You can do something. Lifeline believes that suicide is mostly preventable. Help us save lives. Find out what you can do at lifeline.org.au.
MELfeed.video is about to close operations for tonight, but we'll be back with you next Wednesday evening.
In the meantime, here is a selection of programs that will be seen on our next scheduled web stream. You are welcome to visit our website at MELfeed.video for further details of this project. Until next time, from all of us at MELfeed Video, we wish you a very good night.